everyone. Good morning and a warm welcome to everyone who tune in this week webinar. My name is Jade Huang, a resident partner here in Restonia and Partners, a member of ZICO Law Network, and I'll be the moderator for this session. So the topic for today is reopening Indonesia, legal updates on key sector. We will be discussing on the current economy and business environment as the country emerged from the large-scale social distancing protocols and how these businesses attempt to restart within the framework of new normal. By the end of this session, we hope you'll have a better understanding about the economic stimulus, new law, regulation, and policy introduced by the government of Indonesia to reboot the economy and making Indonesia business-friendly and investor-ready again. Joining me in this session is my fellow colleagues from the Indonesia office. Firstly, we'll have Sandro Panjaitan, a partner from our banking and finance practice group, Baron Rolandi, partner from our corporate M&A, Afrian Rahmat, partner from our dispute resolution practice group, Ajeng Yesi Triwanti, partners from our intellectual property practice group, Anggi Yusari, senior associate from our project practice group. So this webinar will be divided into two parts. The first will be the talk and presentation by each of my colleagues, and thereafter a Q&A discussion. Well, you can post your question by typing in the Q&A feature, but due to time constraint, we might not be able to answer all your questions. But rest assured, do leave your contact details. We'll follow up with an email or connect you to the relevant lawyers with the specific expertise. Let's start the ball rolling by passing the mic to Sandro. Over to you, Sandro.
All right, thank you, Jade. Good morning, everyone. Yes, indeed, this pandemic has brought some of the worst economic impact all around the world. In Indonesia alone, a study shows that this pandemic has dragged more than 1.1 million into poverty. And it is also said that it is worse than the Indonesia's experience after the global financial crisis. To mitigate the economic impacts of COVID-19, the Indonesian government has launched a set of economic stimulus in some sectors, including banking and finance sectors, which I will discuss briefly this morning. So on the late March, President Joko Widodo issued a government regulation in lieu of Law Number 1 of 2020, which was further ratified by the House of Representatives on 12 May 2020. This law sets out legal basis for the state financial authorities to issue regulations and policies in order to stabilize the nation financial system amidst the COVID-19 outbreak. At the same time, with the issuance of this law, the government also issued a government regulation to regulate the large-scale social restriction, or what we might know known as PSBB. So this law was then followed by the issuance of several regulations and policies regarding economic stimulus on fiscal, tax, and banking and finance sectors. For banking and finance sectors, there are 4 regulations that are quite significant on the economic stimulus policies. 3 were issued by OJK, or Otoritas Jasa Keuangan. It's our Indonesian Financial Services Authority. And 1 was issued by our central bank, Bank Indonesia. The first 2 regulations by OJK are regulation number 11 of 2020 and regulation number 14 of 2020. Basically, this regulation introduced the counter-cyclical policy for banks and non-bank financial institutions in order to support debtors that are affected by COVID-19 outbreak. These regulations set out that certain sectors are given priorities for economic stimulus. Those are tourism, transportation, hospitality, trading, mining, and agriculture. Based on this regulation, banks or non-banks financial institutions can provide new financing or debt restructuring for debtors with maximum ceilings up to 10 billion rupiah. The debt restructuring here can be in the form of, among others, reduction of interest, extension of period, or additional financing. OJK also gives relaxation to non-bank financial institution by extending the timeline for them to submit their periodic report to OJK, which now can be done online. And OJK also permits fit and proper tests for main parties in a non-bank financial institution, which include member of board of directors, member of board of commissioners, auditors, or actuaries for insurance companies, for example. So this fit and proper test now can be made via video conference. And this video conference method should be applicable so long that the emergency status due to this pandemic has not been lifted by the government. Those economic stimulus policies should be applicable until 31 March 2021. And also in April 2020, OJK also issued regulation number 18 of 2020, which give OJK power to issue written order to force troubled banks to merge or consolidate. Troubled banks are banks that, based on OJK's evaluation, deal with financial problems that may disrupt its business continuity, or this bank are incapable of dealing with its ongoing or incoming financial problems. So upon receiving a written order by OJK, such bank must first submit a follow-up plan for the proposed merger or consolidation. And these banks may also be exempted from the single present policy requirement, which are applied for Bank Indonesia. The last one that I want to introduce is the Bank Indonesia regulation number 22 of 2020, where Bank Indonesia introduced incentives for banks that provide funding for certain economic activities. So banks that provide funding for export or import activities or provide funding to micro, small, and medium enterprises will be given incentives in the form of relaxation on its minimum statutory reserves requirement. So each bank in Indonesia has this minimum statutory reserve, which percentage determined by Bank Indonesia. And such reserves is to be kept in a deposit account in Bank Indonesia. So for example, if a bank has a minimum statutory reserves of 5.5%, then if such bank is eligible for this incentive, then it will be lower to 5%. The incentive entitlement will be granted on a monthly basis, start from 16 April 2020 until 31 December 2020, so until the end of the year. So I think those are what we view as quite important regulations in banking and finance sectors that support government economic stimulus to mitigate the economic impacts of COVID-19, as well as the government aim effort to maintain the nation's economic stability. Over to you again, Jade.
Thanks, Sandra, for the useful insight. Well, it appears that the OJK has issued quite a number of regulations, yes, in the midst of this pandemic situation. I have to say that I'm quite impressed with what OJK has done so far. Compared to the others government authority. Perhaps next we would like to hear from Beryl Rolandi, our partners from the corporate M&A, on how what are the regulations that has been introduced in the corporate world. Over to you, Beryl.
Thank you, Jade. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today. Well, today I will be briefly talking about a relatively new regulation issued by the Indonesian Investment Coordinating Board, the BKPM, which is Regulation 1 of 2020 on integrated electronic business licensing services. So actually back in 2018, in order for the government to accelerate business and investment in Indonesia, the government issued a government regulation number 24 of 2018 on electronically integrated business licensing services. This government regulation is to boost the number of investment and the ease of doing business by having an electronically integrated one-stop business licensing services in Indonesia. And this is done through the online single submission agency, or the OSS, which is under the support of the BKPM. And since 2018, the enactment of this government regulation, there have been no implementing regulations or specific guidelines issued to help the industry and the businesses to further understand the function and the nooks and crannies where the investment world will be needed. And this the lack of guidelines has caused a lot of confusions and unwanted uncertainties, as well as inconsistencies in the policy, the investment policies by the BKPM. And this regulation one on 2020 on integrated electronic business licensing services is trying to address those issues. And since there are so many issues to be handled, regulation one has basically tried to correct many different issues that has been found since 2018. So it is covering a very broad aspects of investment, and we would not have time to go through one by one of all of those issues today. So I will be talking about three important subjects that I believe are the most important. The first one would be the minimum investment requirements. As you may be aware, the previous regulation requires a foreign investment company or a PMA company to invest at least, well, upward of 10 billion rupiah. And there has been a lot of questions and policies, unwritten policies on this matter. One would be what would happen if there are more than one business activities, or there are more than one location of the projects of a company. So regulation one has now clearly defined that the investment, minimum investment, will be multiplied by the number of business activity and also the location of the projects. But as we go down, we'll see there are some exemptions to this requirement. But before I go to those exemptions, I would like to explain something that is called the Standard Classification of Business Sectors Code, or KBLI code. This is a series of code from 2 to 5 digit codes that identifies business activities. The more digits the code have, the more specific the business activity is. So for PMA companies, the digits used would be the 5-digit codes, as the Indonesian government would like PMA companies to invest in Indonesia without actually hindering the local businesses from having a wider net when it comes to doing business. So for the exemptions, for the situation where the multiplication of minimum investment is not carried out, the first would be if the business activity is a large-scale trading, the investment value does not need to be multiplied if the large-scale trading company engages in business activities where the first 2 digits of KBLI code are the same. For instance, there's a just to be candid here, just KBLI code 12345 and 12678, for instance. As the first 2 digits are the same, the company would not need to multiply its minimum investment value from upward of 10 billion to become upward of 20 billion. But if the business activities are completely different, then it needs to be multiplied. The second is for F&B business, food and beverage business. They would not need to multiply investment value if the locations are in the same region or city. And this also applies to franchise scheme. But if a company has more than one, have stores in different cities, then each of the outlet will need to be equally multiplied for the minimum investment requirement. And the third one would be the construction business. Construction companies would not need to multiply the investment value if the construction activities are in fact in different locations, but actually within the same construction activities. So these are the exemptions that has been made clear and has been the the policies of BKPM for a number of years now. And the second issue I would like to bring to your attention is the introduction of main and supporting projects. So this also has become a lot of queries from the business sectors, whereby there are possibilities where a company has main business activities and of supporting activities. And Regulation 1 now has clearly defined that a company can have more than one business activity, where the other is only a supporting role for the main business activity without having to multiply the investment value. But the supporting project will need still to have all the requirements in place for licenses and all other regulatory required matters. But the supporting project must not generate income. So that's the biggest take of this, that it is very now clear that when the supporting project does not generate income, it can be run, but there are requirements that also still need to be fulfilled. And the third would be types of business licenses, commercial and operational licenses. As you may be aware, upon issuing the NIB, the business identification number, a company will be issued a business license. But business license falls under two categories: those that requiring commitments and those that do not. If a business license does not require commitments, then which means there are no other follow-up that needs to be provided, some technical requirements that need to be applied for, and some fees that need to be paid for. When this business does not require those commitments, then the business license will be effective immediately. But there are business activities that do require commitments that need to be fulfilled. And Regulation 1 to 2020 does divide these business licenses, commercial and operational licenses, into four categories. The first, the type 1 business license would be the ones that I mentioned, not requiring commitments. Type 2 would be those that require technical requirements to be fulfilled before it is effective. Type 3 that require fee requirements to be paid before it is effective. And type 4, those that requires both technical requirements and fees requirements. And this generally applies also to the commercial and operational licenses. So once business license is obtained, a company can only operate and generate income once commercial and operational licenses are obtained. And if there is a business activity that requires both business licenses and commercial and operational licenses to have commitment to be satisfied before they are being effective, then those have to be met first before the company actually generates income. And the way the commitments are provided for to the government is by submitting evidence of the fulfillment of the commitments through the OSS system. So this has now been made very clear, and the BKPM has been trying to get this message across easily to the business people. And the Regulation 1 does provide a whole bunch of detailed requirements and processes that need to be taken into account when applying for these licenses. I guess that would be all for me. Jade, over to you.
Thank you, Beryl, for the detailed explanation on the new investment regulation issued by the BKPM. For those of you who don't know, BKPM actually is the Indonesia Investment Coordinating Board. So they are the first foremost the authority that you would want to approach, if you are thinking about expanding into Indonesia, or they are the only, it's like a one-stop center body that handles foreign direct investment. Next, we will hear from Afrian on his thoughts on the legal proceeding post-COVID-19. Afrian, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Jade. Hi, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for attending this webinar from us. I would like to present that the court service in the period of this COVID-19. So in Indonesia, there are four court proceeding in Big Four. First is there is a military court proceeding, a Jinaya court proceeding. There's under the Supreme Court there are several court proceeding and arbitration proceeding. For military, Jinaya court proceeding is for special region in Aceh only for Muslim Islamic law. That the trials for crimes of according to the Islamic law. Then the military is for the military persons. Both of these court proceeding, court services is already conducted through an online video conference things. So it is minimize the COVID-19 pandemic spread. And for the Supreme Court then issue a circular letter number 1/2020 in early this year. But before that, for certain civil claim or civil proceeding, that kind of thing, in end of 2019, the Supreme Court already introduced an online court proceeding. But the implementation in the early 2020, in the beginning month of January and February, the implementation is not well implemented due to the people or the lawyers still used to have a conventional court proceeding. But because of this COVID-19 in Indonesia starting in middle March of 2020, the Supreme Court issued a circular letter which basically let each of the court decide how to handle the cases, and it depends on the judges who handle the cases. And by this reason, for the civil claim proceeding or civil proceeding, many of the conventional proceeding is moved to a video conference. For that reason, and as for the tax court, we have there is a postponement from 17 March to 2nd of June, and it's from the 2nd of June is already open again for conventional proceeding. But recently on 29 June, which is on the last Monday, it is found that the two administrative staff of the tax court is positive of COVID-19. So the tax court proceeding is closed again until 5 July 2020, or further notice from the tax court office. And for the other criminal and civil is running as usual. There is a video conference. There is some in some agenda of the court proceeding. There are physical attendance, but for commercial court handles bankruptcy, suspension of payment, or IP cases. It was closed from 23rd March until 17 April 2020, but for new cases. But for ongoing cases, it's still ongoing. It depends on the judges itself, like the circular letter from the Supreme Court. But for registration of new cases, it was closed until 17 April 2020, and now it's already started to open again. For arbitration proceeding, for Bani particularly, the all proceeding it was closed from 16 March until 28 May 2020. And in 28 May 2020, the Bani introduced online arbitration proceeding through via video conference. And recently, from today, so 1st of July 2020, Bani is already open again for conventional court proceeding, which is a physical attendance of the proceeding, or it can be also by way of video conference. It depends on the judges itself. I think that's from me, from the recent of court service in the period of COVID-19, and I will try to answer any questions from you all guests. Thank you. Over to you, Jade.
Thanks, Afrian, for your explanation and thoughts on the recent, court activities, during the pandemic outbreak. Next, we will go over to Ajeng, who is our intellectual property partners. She will talk about the latest update on the submission process in relation to intellectual property. Ajeng, over to you.
Hi, thank you, Jade. And thank you everyone for joining this webinar. So unlike other sectors, probably for banking sectors, for IP, there are no laws and regulations made in response to COVID-19. Before the Indonesian government confirmed the first 2 cases of coronavirus on 2nd of March 2020, on 8th of January, Indonesia ratified Beijing Treaty. It is an international treaty governing audiovisual performances. And although the economic rights and the moral rights of the audiovisual performers are governed in our copyright law, we can see that the intention of the government in ratifying this treaty is to ensure that the performers, the audiovisual performers, can enjoy the same legal protection as performers for song or music. So as to the update on the submissions or procedure, there has been some changes in the filings and submissions. So in 2018, the Indonesian IP Office, or the DGIP as we call it, created an online platform for submissions. And since 17th of January 2018, the recordal for copyrights must be submitted online. And since 17th of August 2019, the submissions for new applications for patent, trademark, and industrial design must be submitted online. There were still some applications or submissions which cannot be submitted online back then. For example, for responding to office action or for payment of annuity, patent annuity. And since COVID-19 happened and the large-scale social distancing was in place, the counter for the submissions at the DGIP is closed, or is still closed until today. And they gave dispensation for submissions, which deadline fall between 23rd of March until 13th of May 2020. And starting from 14th of May 2020, the online system can fully or almost fully cover all kinds of submissions and filings. Even though there's still the online system still encountering a problem every now and then, but they are continuously working to fix the problem. And specific for trademark, there's a change in how the applicant can choose the goods and services to be registered. Back then when we file it offline, so we basically, the applicant can choose whatever goods and services they want to register, of course, so long as it is still within the scope of the classification or the NIS classification. And initially, when the application, when the online system was enforced in 2018, the form we still need to print the form, and then basically how we choose the goods of interest was still the same. But since 17th of August 2019, the form is already at the system, so we have to just fill out the data. And then how the client or the applicant choose the goods or services to be registered is by selecting it from the list provided by the DGIP office. And if there are items which are not there, we can ask the DGIP to have it to add it to the system. And I think it started a few weeks ago where the DGIP will only add items with the exact wording provided in the Madrid Goods and Services Manager and NIS classification. So as we are now in the new normal, I think we have to remember what is the significant impact of IP, of COVID-19 in relation to IP. So the significant impact is the increase of IP online infringement. A few weeks ago, I think it's 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had a webinar discussing on how to tackle this IP online infringement, which encompasses of predominantly on copyright and trademark infringement. So if you haven't seen it, you can check our website or our YouTube channel. And the important thing that we need to note based on the available legal measures is the importance to register your brand as a trademark, because without the registration, it will be very difficult for you to enforce to do online enforcement. So as to how you do registration, you can seek local IP consultants assistance, or as you know that Indonesia have ratified Madrid Protocol. For those who doesn't know what Madrid Protocol is, it is an international treaty governing international trademark registration. So basically, you can file your trademark in your own country, which is to be called as the basic application. And then you can select member states which are member of the Madrid Protocol. And there's indeed advantages and disadvantages for filing through Madrid. One of the advantages is, of course, simplicity, where you don't have to contact IP consultant from different countries. And one of the disadvantages is the so-called central attack, meaning that your international trademark registration will depend on the basic application for the first 5 years since the date of international registration. And meaning that it also means that the international trademark application will be cancelled if your basic application is cancelled or abandoned by the applicant. Yeah, I think that will be all from me, Jade. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Aja, for the clear, concise, explanation on the updates, for intellectual property. So just now in your talk, you mentioned that the DGIP office is still closed until today, and all the filings or submission are basically conducted online. So in that sense, do you see any delay in the examination process of the trademark because everything is done online now, or is far more efficient?
Yeah, thank you, Jade. So even though that we can do online filings, but since COVID, due to the large-scale social distancing, some of the officers from the IP office are working from home and some are working from the office. Yeah, and then because of that, I think we can expect a delay, because even before COVID-19, based on because of the backlog of applications at the IP office, the trademark registration can take up to 2 or 3 years. And I think it's a few weeks ago, yeah, we start to receive office action for a provisional refusal for trademark. And we receive it on a date where the deadline to respond it has passed. So I think, yeah, even though we can do online submissions, but as to the examination, they still do it at the office. So yeah, I think we can expect further delays in the registration process. Thank you, Jade.
Thanks, Ajahn. Well, that's very unfortunate to hear. But I guess, for our clients, we just have to think of a way to expedite all the application for them. Otherwise, it will, in a way, jeopardize their business. Thank you again, Ajahn. Okay, last but not least, I'll pass over the mic to Anggi, our senior associate from the project department. So Anggi will be talking about reopening of certain key sectors under in the project industry. Over to you, Anggi.
Hi, thank you, Jade, for the introduction. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining this webinar. I will be speaking about the recent reopening of certain business sectors in Indonesia. As we all know, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of businesses had been forced to suspend their activities as a measure to minimize the spreading of the virus. Due to that, as a result, the Indonesian economy has taken quite a hit. A lot of businesses, such as those in these tourism sectors, retail sectors, have been forced to close or temporarily close their businesses. And in many cases, they had to lay off a lot of their employees. I hear that at least 2 million people have lost their job within the span of 2 months, which is alarmingly high. Now, as Indonesia enters this transitional phase, which we now call the new normal phase, the government's COVID-19 task force announced in early June 2020 that they are allowing the reopening of 9 business sectors. So this is to allow the economy, this is hopefully in the hopes of boosting the economy and to reduce further layoff. The sectors, these comprise of mining, oil and gas, manufacturing, construction, agriculture, farming, fishery, logistics, and cargo services. These sectors are open considering the lower risk of the spread of COVID-19 within those sectors. However, they are expected to create more job opportunities and hopefully bring positive impact to the economy. Now, although these business sectors have been allowed to reopen, the government is closely monitoring these sectors. And if the number of cases of COVID-19 continue to increase significantly because of this reopening, the government may take further action, such as to temporarily close the business again. Now, given the time, I'm not able to speak on all 9 sectors, so I will be briefly discussing about the updates from 2 sectors, the infrastructure and the energy and mineral resources. On construction, a lot of construction projects or infrastructure projects have resumed because construction works is one of the activities that have been exempted from mandatory closure. For instance, in Jakarta, because construction works are exempted from the mandatory closure, they've been allowed to continue operating. However, the governor did ask for specific health and safety protocols. Project owners are obligated to provide housing for their workers within the project areas, and the workers, they were restricted from leaving or re-entering the project area premises back and forth as a way to sort of minimize the spread of COVID-19. Now, that's on a large social distancing policy. However, just another update is in March, the Ministry of Public Works and People's Housing, which supervises the construction services in Indonesia, issued an instruction on the prevention protocol for COVID-19. The protocol basically sets out the establishment of COVID-19 prevention task force in the projects, the identification of potential risk, and then obligation for project owners to provide health facilities within the project area, and also the implementation of COVID-19 prevention within the project area. Now, in terms of new new normal policies, the Ministry of Public Works and People's Housing is currently preparing protocols for new normal, which we have not seen this, but it's going to be interesting to see. So we'll closely monitor this within the next couple of weeks or months. Further, I would like to just briefly update on the upstream oil and gas sector. Similar to the construction, the SKK Migas, which is the authority that supervises upstream oil and gas activities, issued a circular letter which advises production sharing contractors to put risk management measures in place and preventive measures to minimize the spreading of COVID-19. Now, these measures include prohibiting mass gatherings, restricting physical meetings or gatherings, and applying the work from home policy to the extent that it does not disrupt the oil and gas production, and also advising the PSC contractors to apply different working schedules for all of its employees and workers. Now, the last point that I would like to just briefly discuss is, although this is not related to COVID-19, it is quite controversial and it is quite fresh also. It is the amendment to the 2009 mining law. The discussion on this mining law have been in place for 5 to 6 years. It was supposed to be enacted sometime last year, but the discussions have not included by then, and there were protests from several communities. The enactment took place in June 2020. Some of the key updates is, one, the assurance from the government for coal contract of work companies and contract of work companies to extend their operations in the form of a new special business permit. The other interesting update is the shift of the authority from the regional governments to issue mining business permits are now shifted to the central government. In response to this, the Director General of Mineral and Coal issued a circular letter addressed to all governors in Indonesia, which in summary providing the shift of the authority from the regional government to the central government, and then within a certain period of time, the governors will not be allowed to issue further mining business permits. Now, whether or not the new law will bring positive impact is remains to be seen. So it's very interesting to see. Now, the government is currently preparing at least 3 implementing regulations, which are all expected to be issued within the next year or so. So that's it for me. I hope that was insightful. So over to you, Jade.
Thank you, Anggi. Yeah, so I heard just now from your talk that you were saying that so the construction industry was not affected during the pandemic outbreak, as in, you know, they were exempted from being closed down, so it was business as usual. So in that sense, what is the current status of those government infrastructure projects? Because it does involve construction, right?
Yes. I wouldn't say that they're not, entirely not affected, although they are exempted. A lot of contractors have been struggling financially, and investors have been reprioritizing their investment. So a lot of these construction projects, whether in the private or government owned projects, have been some of them have been stalled. In terms of construction, construction of government projects, a lot of them are still ongoing, although I hear that some of them will be delayed. And for example, one of the important proposed infrastructure projects is the moving the capital from Jakarta to Kalimantan. That's still in motion, but however, it's going to be quite delayed because the government is focusing their efforts and funds into rebuilding the Indonesian economy after COVID-19. Over to you, Jake.
Thanks, Angie. Yeah, now that you touch on the issue of the shifting of the capital to Kalimantan, well, I guess we still have to wait a little bit more, before we see, the development come into fruition. Okay. Once again, I thank you all the speaker for your insights and thoughts. I do notice that there's a question from the audience. This is in regards to foreign direct investment, obviously. So Beryl, this question is for you. So the issue now is actually with the activation of the business license. As usual, this is quite a OH issue, about the overlapping of the authority between OSS and PTSB. So Beryl, our client currently have this kind of issue. So what would be your suggestion to them?
Thank you, Jade. Yes, this has been an issue that has been one of the biggest problems with the OSS system coming out. So there are a number of things that may cause this issue. In our experience, one of them is even does not have anything to do with the client itself. One of our issues would be the client has an office where the building is not in the appropriate zoning. So because of this issue, the OSS system recognizes the office having the client having the office in the building that is not in the appropriate zoning as a commitment that needs to be resolved. Although by regulation it is business that does not require any commitment to be fulfilled. So in our experience, there is no way around it. We have to discuss this clearly with the PTSB, BKPM, and OSS and try to find a way out of this. But at the end of the day, the final say should be from the PTSB, and the BKPM and OSS will adjust accordingly. Because for the issue that I mentioned earlier, it's actually an issue within the regional government. So the PTSB would have the biggest say on this matter, and the BKPM and OSS will follow suit actually. So cultivating a good communication with these three agencies, officials would be beneficial, but it does take a lot of work in trying to get the message across. Thank you, Jay. Hope this helps.
Yes. Yeah, as usual in Indonesia, there's always this issue about, the overlapping of authority. It's not something new. And we have in the past, able to assist our client, on how to address it. So if you would like further assistance, how to troubleshoot this, you can email me on Beryl, and we will talk about this further after the webinar. All right, so based on the discussion that I've heard so far, it seems that banking and finance industry is the one that's more progressive in the sense that, they are issuing numbers regulation to address the pandemic outbreak issue compared to other industry. So this question is for Sandro. How is the implementation of those economic stimulus that you have mentioned? As we all know, in Indonesia, the issue is always about the implementation. The government or the authority can, issue regulation as they like, but when it comes to implementation, it will always cause a major headaches to the investor. Over to you, Sandra.
Yes, Jade, thank you. So yes, I agree with you that OJK with these policies has at least the aim to boost these well the economic growth of debtors. So yes, the most result that we can see is for the debt restructuring itself. So as for today, OJK has noted around 99 of the 101 registered banks in Indonesia had restructured loans to around 5.95 million debtors during this COVID-19 pandemic. And the value of the restructured loan until June the 2nd, 2020 is amounted to around 609 trillion, or it's equivalent to 42.88 billion based on the today's currency, foreign exchange, I mean. And also for the non-banks financial institution, there are around 183 registered financial institution that had restructured loans to around 2 million of financing contracts with a restructured value of around 84 trillion rupiah, or equivalent to around 5.9 billion USD. So the restructuring are mostly to small and medium enterprises, where in fact banks and financial institutions are actively approaching these small and medium businesses and offering the financing or debt restructuring. So because based on the Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises Crisis Center, they had this survey, and a total of 62.7 of respondents claimed that their sales had stalled and also experienced a decline in sales during this pandemic. But so yeah, banks and financial institutions are tend to actively approach these small and medium enterprises for debt restructuring. But this does not mean that the restructuring does not touch big companies. Although for big companies, in practice, they have to actively approach the banks and the financial institution and have them evaluating their loans or financial ability. Yeah, but that's for the restructuring. But what we understand is until now there is no recent update regarding banks that which have utilized their incentives from Bank Indonesia. Over to you, Jade.
All right, Sandro. Yeah, that is good to know. So in light of all this debt restructuring initiated by all this SME to the financial institution, has OJK issued any written order to the banks in Indonesia to merge or consolidate as of now?
Yeah, as of now, there is no written order because recently OJK announced that in fact the national banking system development is still in a good condition. Although the capital adequacy ratio as of March 2020 is lowering to around 21%, but it is still above the threshold. So yes, to date, OJK has not issued any written order to banks in Indonesia. Yeah, over to you, Jade.
Okay, thank you, Sandro. I'm looking at the Q&A feature. We have another question from the audience. This is specifically for Ibu Anggi. So Anggi, so in that question, it mentioned that in Jakarta area, isn't the blanket restriction to conduct office activity has been lifted by the Pergub 51/2020, as in no blanket restriction to conduct office activity except for the 8th sector as previously imposed by the PSBB Pergub. So Anggi, what are your thoughts on this?
Hi, thank you, Jade. Yes, that's correct. The Jakarta governor has issued the governor regulation, which sort of now we can open offices and certain shopping centers have also opened, but we still have to look at the and put in place the health and safety protocols. I mean, we're seeing in offices, although they are open, strict measures have been taken. It's similar to the past couple of months. we see, thermal screening, and then the restriction, and then we cannot have the offices in full capacity yet. Although some offices have allowed a number of people in the office, the government, the Jakarta governor has, urged the companies to put in place the health protocols, such as wearing masks, and this also applies not just to offices, but people generally in Jakarta, if they're doing activities outside of the house, to wear masks and to distance themselves from the other people, as a way to sort of minimize the risk of spreading the COVID-19. If you breach the regulation, certain sanctions will be imposed, such as if you're not wearing a mask, you will be imposed with a penalty. Yeah, I think that's all I can say on the subject matter. If that's not clear enough, please do email us, or through Jade, or through our email address, which the production team can provide after this and the webinar. Thank you, Jade.
Yeah, I echo Anggi. So if you have any further question or you require further clarification, do feel free to reach out to us. Our email address will be stated in our website, in the email thank you email that we'll forward to you after this webinar. I do have a question for Afrian, this in regards to the legal proceeding, because it will be interesting to see how the courts, handle legal proceeding post-COVID, and also with the introduction of the e-courts. So Afrian, can you share some insights on this topic?
Hi, Jade. Yes, thank you for the questions. Yes, I think from the court itself is it depends on the judges who examine of the cases. So basically, the Supreme Court give a freedom to the judges or to the court itself, whereby if there is any COVID-19, then the court will close, and then there's any court proceeding will be postponed, or it can be also via video conference on this one. So it back to the judges who examine the cases. But it's for certain agenda like examination of evidentiary or witness examination, it can be conducted through physical, but with certain limitations, like with the persons inside of the courtroom is limited. Only 50% capacity is allowed, and everyone who attended the court hearing needs to wear a mask, and then to obey the protocol of the COVID-19. I hope that answer your questions, Jade.
Yes, Afrian, it does. Yeah, so I guess all of us, will need to adjust, to the new normal. It will take us some time, to go back to how it used to be. But I know human beings are very adaptive. We will surely overcome this. We still have 2 minutes before the end of the webinar, which means I have one last question, maybe a quick one to Anggi. This is in regards to the recently enacted mining law. I know there was some controversial response, from the public on this. What about the industry reaction to this newly enacted amendment, Anggi?
Hi, thank you, Jay, for that. Generally, it's been quite positive because unlike the other business sectors, mining is one of the most highly regulated sectors in Indonesia. There have been a lot of discussions ever since the 2009 mining law was issued. There were a number of implementing regulations, government regulations, ministry regulations that changed from time to time. And this mining law sort of certify one of the key concerns for the investors is, if my contract work or my coal contract work expires, what happens then? Now, it was it's now clear that the government assures that the whole contract of work and contract of works can be extended by issuing a special business permit. So that's a relief to a lot of the industry players who are, more of the bigger names. But it's wait and see for now, because we don't have the implementing regulations yet. Again, a lot of the articles, although they're well written, the elucidation still states clear, cukup jelas, we call it here. So we'll see. Yeah. Hopefully, this can help the investment in Indonesia, to boost the economy, and to attract more investment. So back to you, Jade.
Thank you, Angi. So I guess we just have to wait for the implementing regulation then. For the audience out there, do stay tuned. We will surely issue any legal alerts once the implementing regulation is out. All right, so once again, I would like to thank everyone for attending this webinar, and we hope that you enjoy the session. A great turnout as we have about like 100+ people who joined us this morning. The presentation slide, if any, and recording of this webinar will be sent to you as part of our thank you email and will be available in our ZICO group website. For those unanswered questions, we'll reach out to you via email, or you can also connect with our relationship partner for further assistance. ZICO is present in all 10 ASEAN countries. We certainly have the local insight to assist your business in Southeast Asia. Do join us on our next Wednesday webinar, Industry Impact by Business Leader Part 2 on 8 July, where we will be speaking with executives from Seville, Abbott, and Lazada about how their industry has been impacted by COVID-19. Invitation will be sent out soon to those who have subscribed to our mailing list, so please keep an eye out for them. Or alternatively, you can also register for the webinar through the events section on the ZICO group website or through our LinkedIn page. Once again, thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you next week. In the meantime, stay safe and well.